Hello, everybody. We are here with Dave Brody in the long-anticipated interview.
Oh no.
The tell-all interview with Dave Brody that the people have been campaigning for a very long time. How are you doing, Dave?
I was doing fine up until that intro. Now I feel like I'm going to get probed.
This is exactly the plan. This is the goal.
Because people talk sometimes about aliens and probes, those things.
There are questions about aliens in here, and maybe questions about probes. So let's go ahead and start with the basics. Can you tell the folks at home about some of the different jobs you've had in the past?
Oh my goodness, jobs. I have been a gardener, a lifeguard, a television showrunner, a journalist of ill repute, a professional musician, a recording studio engineer, sometimes a producer on a good day, but mostly I'm just the guy who presses the buttons and puts the microphone where it needs to go. A documentarian, and I've tended to be, most of the subject matter has coalesced around space, which is probably better defined, break it into some buckets for you. Astronautics, astrophysics, planetary science.
Very interesting. Where'd you go to college?
I went to a couple colleges. I went to the Berklee College of Music for the music side, the Boston School of Electronic Music, and then the New York Institute of Technology. So I'm a New York tech guy.
Wow. How did these degrees help you get into the various positions you've worked in?
None of them helped me the slightest. I'm serious. The experiences of being with people, maybe in situations like this, the most practical thing that I learned in college was how to coil a video cable. It got me a job in a truck shooting the representative town hall meetings of one of the suburbs in the state of Connecticut. Because I knew how to coil the triacs, the executive producer said, okay, you can do the truck.
Wow.
And from there, a career was stillborn.
Nice. So, have you just kind of through connections and luck made your way into every other position you've had?
It's really about being the dumbest person in the room with smarter people. That's why I like to do your job, asking the questions, because you can ask a dumb question of a smart person, and if you ask it in a nice enough way, they'll break it down for you. And so you learn. So both in the interview situation and in all of the other professional skill sets, it's a matter of hanging out with the right people, networking. It isn't necessarily who you know, it's who you can talk to.
That leads very well into our next question. What is your favorite interview you've ever done?
Where I was the interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my favorite ones have been with scientists and engineers. So in terms of names that people would know, I don't know if you know the name Seth Shostak. He is, I'm not sure of his title, but he is with the SETI Institute, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He's an astronomer, radio astronomer. He gives a great interview. He and David Grinspoon, the astrobiologist, who's now actually running astrobiology for NASA. He's, I think, deputy director of the division that does astrobiology at NASA headquarters. Those were two great interviews. In terms of celebrities that these folks would know, let me think. Matt Damon was really nice. And I think he comes to mind. I've interviewed him twice, and in every other celebrity interview situation, I always get the sense that we're playing a scene, that they want to talk about their film and their role and how they interpreted it. Damon is not like that. He wants to know what you think and how you reacted to the property, to the performance. He asks as many questions of the interviewer as the interviewer asks him. And so it becomes a conversation, and he's super down to earth, super self-effacing, very genuine, just a great guy. You feel like you've made a friend, not like, okay, the interview's over, you gotta go. So
he's super down to earth, other than when he's on Mars.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah.
What do you think is the
Or
biggest?
on Elysium.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest difference between interviewing someone for art versus for science?
There's no difference.
Yeah.
There's no difference, because if you really want to go for the passion of the person, and find out what turns them on. Let them come out of their shell and not be formal. Let them, relax and have a comfort zone established where they can be completely genuine. So it's not a question of the subject matter. That's just, what's on the table for dinner today. One day it's one thing, one day it's another thing. But, it's all about dinner and the conversation.
Nice, all right. What's your favorite musical artist you've ever worked with?
Once again, in terms of people that this audience might know, the rocker from the 80s, Joe Jackson. And he was great because he knew exactly what he wanted. He was willing to listen to anybody's suggestions and willing to incorporate any good idea, but he had a very good idea of where he was going and how he was going to get there. And he knew all of the moving pieces, the musicians, the engineering, the technical part, the arrangement part, the sonic part, the look of the scene, even though we weren't shooting video or film at that time, it was a recording studio situation. The aesthetics of it mattered, and he had it all totally under control in a very, commanding but gentle way. So I would cite him.
All right. Do you have a favorite contribution you've made to a piece of music?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. Insisting that we record the snare drum in the bathroom for an 80s hair metal band called Americade. And they were just looking for a thrash and trash, and it wasn't happening in the dead studio situation. I said, well, let's just replay the snare drum part alone. Walter, who was the drummer, go in the bathroom, and I'll just throw a microphone in there. And it was exactly what was called for, and it brought everybody up. So yeah, maybe that.
That's really cool. What do you believe is the greatest album ever made?
Ooh, oh man, that's like asking who's your favorite child. So I'm not going to give you a greatest single one. Ones that have affected me deeply. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark.
Ooh.
And Ed Sheeran. Steely Dan's Asia, best sounding album. It's the one that all engineers put on in order to check their room. If you build a mix that can stand up to any track on Asia, you know you've done your job. There's a recording of Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. I think Leopold Stokowski was the conductor. I'm not sure the orchestra, but it is fantastic sonically. It takes you on the programmatic journey that piece of music was designed to do. That piece of music was written before motion pictures, and it creates a motion picture in your mind if it's performed right, and that one was. So,
Lennon or McCartney?
George Harrison.
Good answer. What's your favorite Harrison album?
I don't know if it's an album or the track where he ripped off He's So Fine to Do My Sweet Lord.
Yeah. That's off.
Because that takes balls.
Yeah, it does. That's off 1970s All Things Must Pass, which is, I think, maybe the best album of that decade. It's very possible.
It's a good record. I also cite him, in preference to Lennon and McCartney, who were both great individually and together. My wife has worked with Lennon and McCartney, actually. She was a recording studio manager at Hit Factory in New York. But the reason why I cite George Harrison is that I think he's overlooked in terms of where a lot of the harmonic structure of Beatles stuff came from. The sketches that you hear in the demos, now that they're starting to come out from Lennon and McCartney, don't have that. Well, they don't have the texture, and they don't have the harmonic awareness to where the melody wants to go, that I think all came from George Harrison, I think.
Are there any new musical acts that you're enthused about?
Jacob Collier. Yeah, Jacob Collier. Leifei, you know Leifei?
I'm not familiar.
Woman, artist, does.
Oh, yes, I do, yes.
Because it recalls the era that I grew up in, which was all about bossa nova.
Yeah.
And now here is someone in the 2020s who's rediscovering that music and reinterpreting it in a beautiful way. So it's like a breath of fresh air to me. It wakes me up. Makes me young again. Yes, gotta be young. Young whippersnapper.
Pivoting to a slightly different direction, How can we, as a country, get more young people interested in science?
Yeah. I think it has two answers. One is role models, because people relate to people. So if it's possible to do a little bit of what I do and what others do, which is to put the scientists out in the public, in video, in film and television, in writing, in web, even short form stuff, the personal connection will then lead to an understanding and an interest in the science, technology, engineering, math. But I think it's all part of the same thing. I don't think it's necessarily about science, the information. But having said that, what we lack as a society is an understanding of how to determine what is true. And the best way that I know to do that is the method of science, because science only exists to ask the next question. Once you've established a consensus about, we think this is pretty much what's going on in the universe, well then what accounts for this weird thing? And it's that procedural checking and cross-checking, and sometimes it's like being in a courtroom, it's an adversarial process of peer review, gets to the truth in a way that can be, and sometimes it gets feisty, but it's not about personal morality. And no scientist, well, when they're being well behaved, will attack another scientist on personal grounds. It's all about, here's what's wrong with your data acquisition, or here's why the conclusion you've drawn doesn't follow from the data you presented. And if I think we could communicate the process better, more people would be jazzed about it, more people would think like scientists. And it's not a matter of getting an advanced degree. I'm not a scientist, I don't have one. I'm, like I said, the dumbest guy in the room. But asking the question that helps you get to the truth. That's what science does. And that's why we should elevate it.
That's a very good answer. That's a very good answer. The demographics of this campus echo, if not amplify, the imbalance of race and gender diversity that has long plagued STEM fields. Do you believe that this school in particular has a reason for such a big imbalance?
I don't know enough about the admissions criteria of Kansas State to make that determination, but I would suspect it has nothing to do with school policy. I think it's the demographics of who applies, which gets to the question of why do folks gravitate in the directions that they do, which gets back to the earlier question that you asked. So I kind of see where you're going here. And I think that may be, once again, about role models. You have to see yourself as an African American astronaut. You have to see yourself as a woman biosciences researcher, which means there has to be one who is brought to you. And that's kind of my job as a documentarian, to surface those faces and those voices so that other folks can relate to them, not strictly through the subject matter that they're talking about, but who they are as a whole person. So I bring you back to this campus. I don't know the answer to that, but I think some of that stuff that we just talked about couldn't hurt to try and apply that in. Maybe it's the interviewing for admissions. Maybe it's the outreach. It's probably more about outreach than anything else. I'm sure there's not a quota in place, nor should there be. It should be people's genuine interest and genuine abilities.
In a slightly different area, out of curiosity, what uses and safety measures would make you open to the idea of adopting neural implant technology into yourself?
If I had a different ability than I have now, if I was quadriplegic and a neural implant could help me recover some function, if I was born that way and it could help me learn function that my body didn't come out able to accomplish, I would do that in a minute. And I would start there as the defining criteria for any kind of alteration or implant to people. Does it benefit the person that you're doing it to or with? Do you have their full informed consent to do it? And what are you using the data for? If you're using my neural implant to train a robot to do my job, I want you to have paid me for that, right? But I don't think that's what you're talking about. I think No, I don't know. What are you talking about? Where are we going with this?
That is mostly what I'm talking about. But if you, with your current abilities and capabilities, were to adopt commercial use of such technology for further benefits to yourself, is there anything that you would like the technology to do before you bought it as you are?
I would like it to have an off switch. I would like to be able to bail out of whatever I'm experiencing at the touch of a button. That could not be overridden by anyone else. That is my free will. And with that in place, with safeguards in place, I think the sky's the limit. You know, thinking back to my days as an audio engineer, the game was to translate what was happening in the studio or in the concert hall to what someone heard, you know, sitting on a couch listening to their monitors or with headphones on, coming out of a vinyl record that dramatically changes the sound. You have to know how to adjust the experience that you're capturing in the studio so that it translates to the listener as authentic. And then you can begin to use the studio not as simply a transfer means, but as a creative artistic tool to enhance certain aspects of it in ways that weren't inherent in the original performance. So I think that applies to neural implant technology. If I didn't have to wear VR goggles, but could just go out in the world and have an augmented reality that would allow me to know everything about Clayton, who's filming this, so that I could not ask him a question that's embarrassing to him. I would want to know that and have a little information display alongside him. Because if we do that, then everyone in the world, and we do it with everyone in the world, is no longer a stranger. We all have an ability to know one another and respect each other's boundaries and where we're coming from. So I'm totally open to, you know, a huge future. In the interim, I think there are practical applications that, you know, are not very far away that could be beneficial.
What do you believe is the ethical limit for using CRISPR gene editing on humans?
CRISPR gene editing, any kind of gene editing, whether it's CRISPR-Cas9 or one of the newer techniques. I think the ethical limit at this moment is that it not be germline, which is to say, you make the gene edit to the creature or the plant or the human or the whatever it is that you're doing for their lifetime and their experience only. It does not breed true forward in time, because I don't think we know enough about how to control that. However, that's not a hard and fast limit. There will come a time when we're going to want to have germline enhancement of people. I'm trying to think of an example. If you take me to Mars now and plug me on the surface, I die painfully, you know, in a short time. If you could gene modify me so that I can live on Mars, maybe it opens up a possibility of going to do that. You know, leaving aside the question of, is it only the rich who will go and all that, because those are true and ethical questions that we should wrestle with. But if you could put me into an alien environment where it's challenging for me, but I can survive better, I would take that gene edit and I would want to pass it on to my offspring so that they could also live there, as long as it didn't preclude the possibility of them going elsewhere, you know, in some easily augmented fashion. So right now, to sum up, I draw the line at germline editing, but it's not a hard and fast rule. We're going to want to change that when we are technically sophisticated and, more importantly, ethically sophisticated enough to go there.
In school, science is taught with hands-on labs and demonstrations to help visualize difficult concepts. What are ways for adults not in the education field to supplant this dynamic science exposure?
Television, what I do, vicarious experience. So my job in the role of documentarian and journalist, television producer, writer, director, is once again similar to the recording studio analogy. It's like capturing pieces of the reality of the science being performed and having its beneficial effect on the world, in the world, and presenting that in a way that is emotionally compelling to the viewer. So I think it's, you know, a matter of maybe AR and VR can help, and I think we're going to get there. But right now it's about television and internet, short form and long form video.
So spinning off of that, something I've always wondered, when I'm watching like a nature documentary, and they give the animals, they give them characters, they give them names, they weave narratives around them. How much of that is what's actually happening, and how much of that do you guys have to go into a writer's room and say, okay, well, we have footage of this elephant doing this, so we'll spin it like he's meaning to do this?
Yeah, excellent question. I try and avoid the anthropomorph, unless it's a higher order primate where it's pretty obvious to the viewer that, yeah, the animal is thinking that because he, she, or they think exactly like me. And so I think that's a connection that I will allow myself to make. But I try not to do, Eddie the elephant sees his child in danger, and so uses his trunk to lift the log. You would do the same for your child. Maybe you would, but let the viewer come to that conclusion. Don't lead them on by assigning too much, because you will misinterpret what's going on in the animal kingdom, especially when it comes to predation. How can the lion and the lamb lie together in one moment, and in the next video frame the lion is eating the lamb? The answer is because that's the way it is, and you don't want to apply your human values to that, because we have the ability to not eat the lamb and still not go hungry. The lion doesn't.
Do you have a favorite obscure science fun fact?
Black holes aren't black. There is a point in time, space-time, as Einstein decided and correctly determined we currently think that it is, where light or any information cannot escape. So it looks to us like it disappears from the universe. We think we haven't been up close to one. You've seen animations changing from a circle in the sky that looked like an eclipse to something that now has the third dimension. Thank you, Interstellar. Well, thank you, Kip Thorne, the scientist advisor who decided that black holes actually look that way. But because of things like Hawking radiation, black holes do give off. As they take matter in, they also tear it apart, and that causes huge jets to go very far galactic distances across the universe that we can see from Earth with telescopes. So I think it's a mistake to think of black holes as being black holes into which everything gets torn apart and nothing can survive. There's a lot of interesting stuff that happens right around them, and as you get in frames of reference further and further away from them, to make them fascinatingly brilliant objects.
How soon do you believe that we'll be able to see humans colonizing celestial bodies other than Earth?
In your lifetime?
Really?
Yeah, well, first of all, I kind of object a little to the word colonizing. I used to use it. I try and steer clear of it now because it has implications. It's like the British Empire taking over and committing crime to indigenous peoples, or what we European types did to indigenous folks who are the original residents of here in the United States. We did colonization of Native Americans. We should not colonize places in space. We should settle them, although settlement as a word,
Also perhaps
has a little bit of baggage. Maybe the way to say it is we should build communities in space, whether they're on the surface of planets or in human and robot constructed artificial habitats that can be very large, so large that the interiors of them are by and large indistinguishable from being on a planetary surface. You have gravity, you have air to breathe, you have plants to grow, you have animals to run around. You can soar in the air as you get to the lower gravity portions of them. You can have any variable gravity level that you want. Those kinds of experiences maybe are possible in your lifetime, because I think we're right at the verge of a breakout beyond the planet, if it's once again managed in a sensible way.
Do you think
consensus?
Yeah. Do you think the government is doing a decent enough job at enabling this?
Better job than by the government you mean the U.S. government.
The United States government.
And I can expand that to say governments worldwide, governments of nations, are all doing a better job now to understand that the competitive pressures of the commercial environment lead to scientific and engineering breakthroughs, mostly on the engineering side. Mostly what you see, for example, SpaceX doing with deleting anything that isn't absolutely necessary and finding a more clever way to do it so that you can build more of them faster, so that you can lower the cost of a kilogram from the surface of Earth to low Earth orbit and beyond dramatically. that hasn't been the original intention of how government space programs were done. But lately, governments have seen that paying for a ride to space on a commercial launcher enables that launch cost to go down. And I think we'll see that play out over and over and over again. And smart governments will go that way.
Do you believe that humans will ever contact life forms from other planets?
I do, and once again, in your lifetime, and I think in my lifetime, they're not likely to be intelligent. They're likely to be organisms that are living 2 or 3 meters below the surface of Mars, which is currently not a very nice place, but it was a beautiful place 2.5 billion years ago. It was, we think, Earth-like, at least in the respect that it had liquid water on the surface. It had enough of an atmosphere so that organisms could have evolved, and it disappeared, the benign environment disappeared at a slow enough rate so that it is possible that that evolution could have continued. So you could find, microbes, probably not very sophisticated ones, but you could find little creatures living underground on Mars in the oceans that are contained within what we call the snow globe moons of Jupiter. Europa is a prime example. I think every of the large Galilean moons, Europa, Callisto, and Ganymede, I think are now believed to have subsurface oceans. Io or Io does not, because it's within the tidal gravity of Jupiter to the point where it gets ripped apart, and it's not a nice place. It's a place of sulfur volcanoes. So I'm not sure if you're going to find life there. You might find cold life in the methane oceans of Titan. You might find life being spewed out of the fissures in the moon of Saturn, Enceladus. We might find life on Triton, which is a moon of Neptune, I think, which is, once again, extremely cold, but has maybe an active geology. We didn't think Pluto, until we flew by it, would be as active as it is. So, yeah, I think good bet for some kind of probably not very bright microbe living in a lot of places in the solar system. And we may even be their descendants here on Earth. Life may have evolved somewhere else and come here and seeded this planet.
Wow.
Because we know rocks get blasted off of moons and planetary surfaces all the time. We have Martian meteorites, we have meteorites from the moon.
Assuming the existence of intelligent life forms within any sort of feasibly reachable distance from Earth, do you believe that attempting to contact intelligent life forms on other planets is a good idea? And who do you think should make that call?
Great question. Oh, great question. I used to think it was a wonderful idea. So wonderful, I thought the idea was, that when I was a producer at Sci-Fi Channel, I tried to get a thing going whereby viewers would send in their poetry, their music, their text. We would filter that, moderate it a little bit, and then we would broadcast it to the universe using the radio telescope in Russia, in what had been the Soviet Union, Yevpatoria, who was willing to do that because they believed in active setting, the outreach. I thought it was a great idea. And then some more sober folks sort of took me aside and said, you need to think about this a little bit more. What happens if that alien species is predaceous and you've just announced your arrival as a potential prey species? Or what if we just don't want to have the conversation, who are you to speak for Earth? So now I believe, to answer your question exactly, that it should be a consensus that's arrived at in some form of democratic, unpressured fashion before we go broadcasting purposefully at very high energies in specific directions. We've had leakage off of the Earth since there's been radio broadcasts. So, if you find enough receiver, we are already known in the cosmos by an intelligent species who's interested in hearing us in radio or in looking at our atmosphere with telescopes. We have modified our atmosphere simply by virtue of being human and being the smart monkeys that we are. We've changed the atmosphere that's observable from very, very far away. So, in some ways we're doing active search for extraterrestrial intelligence simply by living our lives and changing the planet dramatically. But if it's put to a vote, and I think it should be, then that would be the more secure way of saying, yes, let's do these high energy directed intelligence transmissions. Smarter scientists, smarter people than me, including SETI scientists who spent their careers thinking about this stuff, both agree with what I've just said and radically disagree and would like to broadcast. So you should talk to them, the true expert.
Do you believe that a man-caused climate disaster of apocalyptic proportions is inevitable?
No, totally not. Totally not. And apocalypses are what you make them, right? If you make them so that we as a species are dramatically challenged back to an earlier step in our technological evolution or disappear entirely, we're going to take a whole number of species with us, and that ain't fair. We could do that, but we're not going to do that. The very fact that you asked this question and its answer may be heard by folks through, distributed media means that we're thinking about it in a way that will change the way we deal with it, and already are. One can point to the popularity of electric cars, not any particular brand, specifically, but just the fact that, folks are getting the message that, hey, if you can pollute less and still get where you're going with a satisfying experience, we should do that. So in terms of what technology should we employ for energy production, we should do the smart ones, which to me are wind, solar, nuclear. I'm a believer in nuclear. We should, not mine oil in the ground because oil is too valuable for other things to be burned as fuel. If you're going to dramatically change the atmosphere, you want to be able to do that in a very thoughtful way. We are terraforming the Earth. We should, maybe go and terraform some other worlds first and make the mistakes there before we dramatically change how Earth works. Do geoengineering elsewhere on things. It wouldn't be called geoengineering. It would be called saline engineering or lunar engineering if you terraform the moon. But we should learn how to do that. Which once again takes you back to your space question and why I'm a dramatic space advocate and believer. What I do as a journalist is different from what I do as a documentarian. As a journalist, I have to ask the fair question that you're asking. As a documentarian, I can put my spin on it as long as I announce, hey, this is fun for you space advocates who are the natural audience for it.
Do you think there are ethical limits to terraforming other planets? It kind of goes back to the colonization we were talking about.
It does, and the answer is there anybody living there, and are you going to help them or hurt them? If there is stuff alive on Mars, it's not doing well. It's not doing as well as it did in its past if it evolved there. So maybe we could be the agents by which Mars gets to be a green planet, and then eventually a blue planet, as others have postulated, or lots of other places, in the solar system.
But who are we to make that call that a green planet is necessarily better than a dead red planet?
We're the smart monkeys who like to live on green planets. And so because we can do it and nobody else wants to do anything different than we are aware of, we should poll the dolphins once we learn to speak with them and say, do you guys mind if we go and, change an ocean on another world? They might have something to say about it, but right now we don't know what they're saying, so we have a window of opportunity.
What do you believe is the strategy to mitigate the current political climate of tension in America?
Conversation. We should talk to each other like this. We should share our differing ideas. We should find the commonalities where we agree. We should not. To make this personal, I've tried to limit my social media outputs in terms of snark. Because being a writer, right, it's always easy to go for the joke. It's easy to go for the snarky statement. It's easy to put that person down because there's this tiny thing wrong with just what they've just said, instead of looking at the overriding bulk of what they've said that is right and that I agree with. So have the conversation, and as it pertains to social media, because it's send, receive, it's different from what we're doing here, where I can read your body language and modify what I'm saying according to how you are perceiving it. The conversation as it currently goes on in social media is gated. There's, a diode. You go through it and you can't get back once you've made the snarky statement. So, I think that's a way. And, it's my job as somebody who takes other people's smart ideas and presents them to the public to present those ideas in a fair and balanced way. Show what is good about them, suggest what is bad about them, and encourage the audience to respond either to us, the broadcaster, or directly to those who we are profiling.
What do you think will be the long-term ramifications of the upcoming presidential election in this country?
Depends on the term that you mean by long. I, as a space guy, tend to think really long term, in which case the answer is not much. In the very short term, which means for the next 4 years, and that, by the way, is a problem. We have two main challenges. To divert from your question for just a moment in order to answer it more fully, our two main challenges are that stockholders, I own some stocks, like to get a positive return at the end of every quarter, which forces decisions that don't necessarily look at the long term output. Governments think in terms of funding cycles that are based on the election cycles of their representatives, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever it happens to be. So an authoritarian would make the case, well, Dave Brody, if you want long term, I can guarantee you long term as long as I'm alive and in the job as dictator of your country. That doesn't persuade me, right? I'd rather be able to kick the guy or the woman or the binary or whoever they are out after some defined period. So as it pertains to this particular presidential election, let's talk in concrete terms. Let's name names. If you install, I'm not particularly frightened of Donald Trump the man. I'm frightened of the cohort of personnel whom he will install in key positions to hold forth in ways that I do not approve. And I'm much less fearful of a Joe Biden's coterie cohort of installed experts because I already know most of them because they've been here for 4 years, right? And some of them are from prior administrations, Democrat and Republican, and I know them. And I know that they are likely to stay on in a second Biden term. So as it pertains to this particular election, I'm a Biden guy and a strong advocate of him and his policies, most of them with some notable differences.
Why do you believe most of the major political players in the U.S. right now are as old as they are?
Because I'm that old, Sonny, and we don't want to see any changes made. What killed the Soviet Union, besides a bad ideology, was a gerontocracy. Leaders got to be older and older, and the experts they surrounded themselves with were older folks. And so, once again, the game was, well, we are more experienced, and so we know how to make the 5-year plan work. I think we're doing too much of that in the United States. I'm excited about young voices. I send money to campaigns who are more progressive than I am, simply because I want their voices in the conversation.
Do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic caused irreparable damage to the social skills and development of the youth in 2020?
Nah, they're smart. They'll fix it. I'm very optimistic. I think COVID-19 was, a tragedy, a pandemic, and when it started to be handled properly, was handled extremely well. So I see that looking back on how that was handled is something that your generation, your cohort, will have the benefit of that experience and will come out as better people. I don't think the social challenges were as a result of not having face-to-face conversations for a couple of years. I think that wound will be healed. Some people were damaged dramatically, and we're going to help them. But by and large, I don't think it's going to be a big problem long term.
Knowing what we know now about COVID-19, how would you have handled the pandemic if you were president?
Back to your two prior questions, I would have handled it pretty much the way the Biden administration handled it, and not the way the Trump administration handled it. By which I mean, respect the scientists, have an overabundance of caution until you know what you're dealing with, and then supplement those who were most severely impacted. And I saw a lot of that happen in these past 4 years.
Do you believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone when he shot John F. Kennedy?
He was the only one who pulled the trigger. Were there other triggers on the field? The body of evidence that we have now. I'm not an expert in this area, so once again, I'm glad you asked on the basis of belief, because this is just what I believe. is that the evidence is not compelling for more than one shooter. The question that I have is, what caused him to do it? Who put him up to it? Who beyond himself created the conditions under which that happened? Was there a conspiracy? Was it just that he had a bad childhood and, a bad reward system? Those are things that are not in evidence now, and I would like to know more about.
Is there a particular theory that you lean towards for any given reason?
The theory that I lean away from is the single bullet theory, because how did one bullet damage two people and then wind up on a stretcher alongside one of them out of their bodies, which I think is what happened, and was found to be, after the commission looked at it, to be a plausible explanation, and therefore leading to the conclusion of a single shooter. I'd like to know more about that, not to the point of digging up corpses, but just, it would be really nice. Well, nice is the wrong word. It would be really instructive if that event had happened now when everyone has a camera, right? Because we would have a lot more evidence. And had that been the case then, we might know more and come to entirely different conclusions than we've come to. So it's always going to be a fascinating mystery for those who dabble in it, and I don't really. I was alive when it happened, but the outcome of it affected me pretty dramatically. It's one of those, where were you when you found out Kennedy was shot? Where were you when you found out this Challenger space shuttle exploded? Those are experiences that are in my lifetime.
Do you believe that long-form media content will actually be replaced by short-form content such as TikTok as the primary way information is consumed?
Primary way, possibly. There is no more. There is not long-form exposition in the way that there used to be, and I'm a documentarian, so I want there to be long-form, because I want you to hear my golden prose over and over again, spoken by a wonderful announcer, and these beautiful pictures that people experience. But I think in terms of information transfer, you got to go at the speed at which information is traveling. So, long-form for information's sake, which I define as true fact. There's a better way to define information than that, and that is input. This question is self-answering at that level. Input of experience, input of data is traveling much more rapidly. It's just the quality of the data is not keeping up with the speed of its transfer. That's why.
What is your stance on the proposed TikTok ban? Do you believe that there is any merit to the argument that the government is doing so because they have no way to control the information on it?
So that the government, meaning the United States government,
Yes.
has no way to control what flows on TikTok, therefore they want to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
I believe kind of the opposite, that it is more a question of what that information that is flowing would be accessible to an authoritarian regime, which is to say China currently, because I don't trust what they would do with it. So do I trust the United States government? The way it's presently constructed, yes, because we have this creative argy-bargy where we disagree and we fight about stuff. So government conspiracy, no. Do I believe in the ban? No, I don't. I would rather see the free flow of information on all platforms. And there's going to be a sorting mechanism that is going to be painful to some people, but I'd rather that the truth was out there to be apprehended than that the truth is covered up because somebody decided that it wasn't true.
Do you believe Hollywood is actually running out of originality?
Well, they'll run out of originality when they run out of money to pay people to think originally. And so far that hasn't happened. What I do think is interesting, and it's happening at a rapid pace, and it's affecting me in my industry, is the penetration of artificial intelligence as a movie maker. Right now it's at the level of, I can ask GPT-4 to construct me a plot line with characters whose attributes are given, and I can use that as creative feedback to do my own. What happens when that AI is smarter than me and is just as creative? So then the originality becomes not changed in its amount, but changed in its progenitor, from a guy with a legal pad, writing stuff that comes out of his or their head, and a collective intelligence that has been pre-trained and is generating on the basis of its pre-training. Is it still original? Well, the case can be made it's as original as mine, but it ain't mine.
So is there a future in music and filmmaking that heavily uses AI that personally excites you?
Well, totally, because I think it expands the possibility. But I think what works best is if it's, once again, as what works best in politics is at the level of conversation. I think if we can converse with that AI as opposed to being lazy and letting it do the work. I've seen in music, because of MIDI technology, first and foremost, the fact that you can put something on a timeline and correct its rhythm, and on that same timeline with a plugin correct its pitch. Well, now you're down at the level of monkeying with the elements from which that music is constructed. And it's been, to some users, dramatically freeing, and great musics are being made. And it's also gone the other way, and a lot of junk music is made and spoon-fed, if not force-fed, to the consumer. Because you do something that is commercially successful, you build on that commercial success by doing something that is much like it. That sounds like something that artificial intelligence is extremely good at, right? So it's both good and bad, and it's all a matter of how we manage it.
Regardless of quality, do you believe that Disney is diluting the Star Wars brand with the quantity of content they're releasing?
I don't know that I can separate the two. Do I think that the quality has gone down as a result of its quantity? Is another way of maybe posing that question. Once again, they have a lot of money, so it's not driven by anything other than wanting to give the consumer an experience that they will enjoy. Has that quality declined for me? I was never a huge Star Wars fan to begin with. I think there are 1.5 good movies.
Very interesting.
You know, there's Episode 4, which was the first one we saw, and there's Rogue One, which was a spin-off of one line in Episode 4. And the others are kind of, mediocre.
Interesting.
They drove the technology of movie making, but were they great stories? No.
Usually when people say there are 2 good Star Wars movies, they usually refer to A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite design from the USS Enterprise?
The Next Generation Enterprise. I'm not enough of a Trekker, sorry. Trekkies don't like to be called Trekkies, they like to be called Trekkers. I've been doing enough sci-fi cons to know this now. I've worked for the Sci-Fi Channel. I've worked for Newsarama. And why do I pick that Enterprise? Because it had 10 forward. Because it had a bar where you could get loaded on saurian brandy and have conversations with people. And, even though they were your superior when you were on duty, you could find out that they were having marital troubles. And you could help them and engage with them and see them as whole creatures, whether they were human or human-derived or other. So yeah, I'm going with the 10 forward on TNG. And the holodeck.
If you were given the opportunity to make a television show in the Star Trek universe, what would it be about?
It would be about Spock's love children throughout the galaxy. Because, he was busy.
Do you have a favorite video game?
I do not. I'm completely ignorant when it comes to the video game world.
Very interesting. Have you ever been curious?
No.
Huh.
And once again, I think it's an ego problem for me. I think it's somebody who sees themselves as a creator. I want to control the experience that you're having to a larger degree than I'm really entitled to. Whereas in the gaming environment, I can just set the boundary conditions. And also because I have a passionate fear and dislike of losing. So for that reason, anything that is not a cooperative gaming model is a turn-off to me. So I don't engage.
Okay.
But once again, I fully acknowledge that's my issue.
What's your favorite novel you've ever read?
Oh, man. It's a novel for kids by Robert Heinlein called The Star Beast. because it introduces us to an intelligent alien in a way that we weren't expecting, and parallels the process of what I've come to learn we may go through when and if we do contact other intelligences or manufacture other intelligences of our own initial creation. So I'm going to go with Heinlein's The Star Beast. It was written for kids. And maybe, I'm very close to my inner child, so it wasn't War and Peace.
So,
much shorter.
Pivoting to the final direction we have for this interview, some more personal questions. For one, there's a growing movement among the population of this school to encourage Bryn Brody to grow his facial hair out to closely resemble yours. Are you a supporter of this movement?
Nah, I'm neither a supporter nor an advocate or an adversary of it. I think he should do what it is that works for him. And it's a pretty face. I don't think he should cover up his pretty face. But he's entitled to, if he wants to. I think his career track may have something to say about it. Mine doesn't. I'm expected to look a little left of center or weird. His is probably a different expectation.
There exists a video of you getting married underwater.
There does.
Yes,
That's true.
I've seen this video. It's a very interesting one. If you had to get married anywhere else, where do you think is the second best place to do that?
Oh man, I would totally need to make this decision in conversation with my spouse, with my wife, Kimber. She would have to weigh in, and in terms of experiences that I would propose to put on the table that I would love and I think she might like. A mountaintop of a mountain that we climbed ourselves, which is to say not brought there by a helicopter.
Do you have a favorite mountain?
Algonquin Peak in the Adirondacks, because it's a good one-day climb. It's big on top as opposed to some of the other Adirondack high peaks, which are more pointy, so you can spread out and do a little more stuff while you're up there. And it's on a very convenient trail route where you can go up one day, go down the backside, camp, go around somewhere else, camp, go to the third place, camp. It's a good 4-day backcountry hike that's not too far away from civilization and gets you some spectacular views and the heroic experience of climbing a mountain. Thanks for asking.
On that note, what is your favorite place you've ever been to?
The opposite of that, it was Orange Canyon, which is a coral reef in Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands are notable for their water clarity, and at Orange Canyon, on a good day, you can dive to 110, 120 feet and have perfect clarity all the way up to the surface, and you get to that surface by swimming through cracks in the coral reef. So you're completely enveloped by marine organisms, beautiful gorgonians, fish outside, incredible sponges, almost psychedelic colors as you spiral up this canyon in the crack, fully 100 feet of dive. So you can spend, go to 120 feet, which is deep, and then spend all of your decompression time seeing cool stuff, because the top of the reef is very close to the surface.
Wow.
So I would,
That sounds stunning.
I would encourage everyone to go to Orange Canyon, Cayman Islands, or check out some videos of people who've been there.
Bryn Brody.
No, back to Bryn.
Bryn Brody, yeah, that's him.
I love that guy. I wish all these questions had been about Bryn and his sister. He has a twin sister.
Bryn Brody has long denied allegations that he looks exactly like you. Do you have any input on the situation?
I think I've already given it. He's more pretty than I am. So he doesn't look exactly like me. Yeah, there's some genetic stuff going on. I hope I haven't injured him too badly in his somatic presentation to the world.
What is the most surprising thing your son has ever done?
Most surprising. I can't answer a single one. He surprised me over and over again. When he was a karate student, the first time he sparred with somebody, I was astonished at his speed. And I was astonished at his, I won't call it aggression, but he really took care of business. And I didn't see that streak in him before. I was astonished at how he taught himself coding. I was astonished as how, with the help of VATSIM, he taught himself the language of aviation. I was astonished at how he taught himself to fly with X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator, I think. He just continues to astonish me. So I can't pick a one thing, good or bad, that I was ever, that overcomes any of the others. There are many, many astonishing moments in Bryn's life, and it's just begun.
Is there an occupation or field of study that you've always wanted to go into but haven't had the opportunity?
All of them, which is why I'm a fan of artificial intelligence, because now I can bring the expertise, I can summon the expertise without having to call someone on the phone, although I should make that phone call, they may not take it, right? And they're busy doing the thing that they're expert at. So there's not, that was kind of a flippant answer of all of them. Having been around people who are real scientists, who are astrophysicists and astronomers, and astronauts, I would like to know more about the universe, not only beyond Earth, but to understand Earth better. It's helpful to have something more than just one example. So I would like to study, and will continue to learn more about those disciplines. Going off the Earth in order to understand the Earth, because I think it's the key to understanding anything.
What is a hot take you have?
John McKay will be an excellent journalist.
Alrighty then.
Hot enough for you? It's getting hot in here?
Yeah. I think that'll suffice. I think that's a pretty good one for that one.
Got you laughing.
Yeah.
Brought color to your face.
You most certainly did.
See, we're having a personal conversation now. Yeah.
We are. Now to get even more personal, back over to the more lighthearted side of things, is there an embarrassing story about Dave Brody that you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience?
I wouldn't mind sharing with the audience anything embarrassing about Dave Brody. I love my kid, and I don't want to see him injured in any way, so no. I won't go there.
Alright then. Since you will not be attending an in-person ceremony, what are your plans for Bryn's graduation?
We're going to party. We're going to party hard. I don't know that we have defined plans yet, because the timeline of his next steps are unknown to us. So, because that's true, where he's going to be and what he's going to be doing would define what it is that we do. But there'll be something. Ask me in a year. I don't think it'll be back here, though. My inclination is that it probably won't be, which in some ways is a shame, because this has been a great experience. We like K-State.
We also like K-State. Two more questions for you. One being, what tips do you have for a casually aspiring interview journalist?
Don't ask 42 questions. No, that was another flick answer. Beyond that, I would say, start with the question that you think your guest is dying to tell you. Play on their turf, because it will open them up to the question that you really want to ask, that may be uncomfortable or embarrassing, or something that they've just built up a wall around and therefore have a pre-canned answer which won't be good enough for your purposes. So if you start on their turf, or in this situation, if you start on my turf, I'm going to open up to you first, and then when you ask me the difficult or more challenging question, I will already have revealed that I'm able to communicate on that level, and therefore I'm more inclined to do so. It sounded very formal, but I think I said what I meant.
Oh yeah, yes, I understood. Okay, one final question. This is not information I know. I do not know how public this knowledge is.
And I don't either.
What is your middle name?
Ooh, it's one for the ages. I was born with a middle name that I don't use and won't reveal, but it starts with the letter S. So I now call myself David Sky Brody. You'll have to do more research.
There's going to have to be a bit more investigative journalism that will have to be conducted after this interview.
Is it Suzanne? Who will say?
If us at the network ever find out the answer, we will make sure to broadcast it out to the people. But I believe that is all the questions I have. So we'd like to thank you very much for the pleasure of your time.
You're welcome very much. Thanks for asking such deep and probing questions, and I hope my answers weren't pedantic and boring.
No, they were.
That's why editing is made.
Yes.
Snip, snip, snip.
They were very fascinating stuff. Well, alrighty then. This was the interview with Dave Brody. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Thank you for listening to me. I don't know why you would want to, but the fact that you did